Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's Jeremy Werner. It's Joey Wagner. Yes, we're doing a football podcast. We will dive into basketball, and we will talk about Stojakovic. We will talk about Petrovic. We will talk about Ivisic, all the itches that Illinois is scratching in this offseason as they get Petrovic on board in this class. Derek Piper will join me to break that down. We'll see if there's any other news later this week with Illinois basketball that we can dive into. But, Joey, we got a lot to talk about with football since the last time we were on this podcast. Josh McCray found a landing spot in the SEC going to Georgia. Alex Bray, who started some games last year for Illinois, enters the transfer portal. Illinois lands a transfer in Tyler McMillan. Victor Singleton, the headliner in this class 2026, flips to Texas A&M. They also had an in-state prospect and Tony Balanganayi, a good lineman who's going to play defense for Illinois. We got to wrap up spring practice. We got to talk about the NFL draft. And, of course, we got to talk about QB1. So there's a lot to hit on in this one. So try to be efficient with our time on all of this.
What a lead where you got Tony B's name right on the first time. That's probably been the biggest development for us since the last pod. I believe in knowing your roles too, right? Like I know right now I am placeholder for Derek Piper's next podcast, and I am all aboard that. I understand that, and basketball off season is the basketball off season, so you can rename my little thing down there, placeholder for Piper.
That'll do. But yeah, we got to talk about the NFL draft. Pat Bryant is going to go at some point this weekend. I don't know if anybody else is going to go. We're also got to look forward to like next year's draft because that could be a great one for Illinois football and Brett Bielema's program because they'll all be players he recruited, brought in the program, all of that. So we'll dive into all of that. I got to be honest with you on this podcast, though. Like speaking of all the Balkan guys that have been added, I have been doubting and self-doubting myself with pronunciation. So Balanganayi, the fact that I got that out correctly, because you asked his coach, I know how to pronounce it because we want to make sure we get those right. Like Ivisic, I have been struggling with. I've been going back and forth between pronunciations, stumbling all over it. So I apologize to the podcast audience. I got to own that from the start.
Yeah, that's for a while. It's like, I just have to learn how to spell it. And then podcasting got like where it is. Like, oh no, really got to learn all of this here.
Ivisic, I've been saying probably random stuff. I don't know, but it's Ivisic.
A lot of names going right now, Jeremy, in the basketball portal world and free agency world. Can we just call it that?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've been doing some background. The Ringer did a great story on the Balkans that was somebody posted on our board, and I highly suggest it was written a couple years ago. You get to learn a little bit more about that. And I did watch Once Brothers, the Vlade Divac and Drazen Petrovic documentary last night. Hour and 15 on Netflix. I was like, man, let's dive back into this. One of my favorite 30 for 30. So I feel like I'm learning more about the world, especially that Balkan Peninsula.
Yeah, that 30 for 30 was in like the height of some really, really just awesome seasons of it. I admittedly haven't been as dialed into the most recent ones, if there still are most recent ones, but that one in that stretch, there was probably like 15 of them in order. It's like they were just, each one of them was just a hit after hit after hit.
Yeah, when it was actually the Bill Simmons production, like he was part of it, all of it. Oh, phenomenal. All right, well, let's talk about it, Joey. We got to talk about QB1, Luke Altmire. Last week, we were talking on the podcast, and I had, told people and said on here that Illinois felt good about its guy. We talked about Tennessee opening up that spot at quarterback with Nico leaving and going to UCLA, and it turns out that's a trade that Joey Aguilar, who had transferred from Appalachian State to UCLA, he's now going to Tennessee. So college football trades are possible nowadays. But there was growing buzz late last week, and I had heard, I think it was late Thursday night, that there was some chatter. Like there was some actual conversations happening. Not with Luke himself because he wasn't in the transfer portal, right? But I think we know nowadays, and this happened last winter with Luke, you don't have to be in the transfer portal to have some back channel discussions. That's why you have agency, family members, former coaches, all of that. At the end of the day, like I'd spent all weekend, we had been texting back and forth of it all weekend, Joey. Luke Altmire had the opportunity to go to Tennessee. It was there. He could have made a lot of money going to Tennessee. And that is a bigger opportunity than he even got from an SEC school in the winter. Luke Altmire, at the end of the day, turned it down, and it would have been a significant raise for him. He would have played in front of 100,000 people at Tennessee, and that's a team that was in the college football playoff last year. They have to replace a lot of talent. He had that opportunity. We know that now. Like we've gotten it enough from enough people. He had that opportunity, And yesterday he makes it clear with his tweet, the belt, which is referring to the SEC belt that he was talking, or the Big Ten belt he was talking about after beating South Carolina, that keep the champagne flowing. He's going to be back here. So at the end of the day, Luke Altmyer's turned down a couple SEC programs this offseason, turned down Tennessee. I think it says a lot because he said he didn't want to make a change. He didn't want to, go someplace new and start all over again. And he was a man of his word, Joey. So there was some nervousness. With the moment Nico entered the transfer portal, Illinois goes, all right, we better be ready for this. Let's be proactive, see what we can put together financially. But at the end of the day, they couldn't compete. I mean, Illinois is a mid-market kind of program when it comes to NIL. And, the revenue share, there's only so much you can spend. Tennessee's a big market program. We know all this NIL money getting thrown out before the House settlement gets settled. And they needed the quarterback in the worst way to continue their rise under Josh Heupel. And ESPN reported today, Luke Altmyer, Avery Johnson at Kansas State. There's another quarterback that was involved there, TCU's quarterback, I believe. We're all kind of back-channeled and all rebuffed Tennessee, so kudos to all those kids. But Luke Altmyer could add a lot of leverage here. I think he's going to get a little bit of a bump for Illinois, but he turned them down. So he is a man of his word. And, boy, what a big deal this is for Illinois to avoid potentially just a move if he did leave that would have been, I don't know, catastrophic, but certainly – what was the tier right below that of how that would have changed the season for them?
A total mess. It's probably the tier below that. You've had to recalibrate everything you think about Illinois football going in to this season, which and it's not just us, a lot of people see them as a dark horse college football playoff contender. And a lot of that is on the shoulders of Luke Altmyer and really the right arm of Luke Altmyer. There's a lot of talent, Jeremy, right? We know that. We know what's there on defense. We know the offensive line, the running back. You can go down the list. So this isn't to try to overlook the returning talent, but you got a quarterback. You got a lot of optimism, and Illinois has a quarterback. So when this news, when it started maybe becoming a little bit more clear that this was a possibility, we knew leverage existed when Nico entered the portal. We knew, okay, Luke Altmyer is a really good quarterback and a name that's going to be on the list because he should be. That's just who he is. But once you started getting some information on Thursday night, and you and I were talking about it, the thing that we kept coming back to universally is, yes, this is college football 2025. This is just what it is. Obviously, that door is there, and he can go through it, make a lot of money, and go to that program and help push them where they are. But we had both talked, this doesn't align with what we've talked to Luke Altmyer about since December. So that's kind of where I got hung up is, he talked about the comfort. He talked about being with Barry Lunny for a third year. He talked about all of these things. And Luke Altmyer, to his credit, has been as genuine as they come in his conversations with us. He has shot it straight. Even in December, he acknowledged, yeah, there were options out there.
There's a lot of money being thrown around.
100%. And not everyone's going to do that. You can dance around that and be done with it. But he's been pretty straightforward since he arrived in Champaign. So all those talks about comfort and Barry Lunny and what Illinois has, as much as he's afforded to Illinois, and that's 10 wins, it's a chance to be a playoff contender this year. Illinois has afforded a lot to him and gave him that reboot that he longed for and the opportunity to be a Power 4 starter. So that was what was stuck in my brain with all of this is I don't think he's lying when he said that. Now, obviously, we know how meaningful that is to him, how meaningful this opportunity at Illinois, how meaningful comfort, the relationships. Cole Rusk is one of his best friends. He's close with Aiden Lawfrey, with Hank Beatty. Go down the list. I mean, he has made some really significant bonds since coming to Champaign, and you see how much that's worth to him. And the thing is, Jeremy, you and I can sit here, and people listening can sit there. You wouldn't have blamed the guy if he walked through the money door, right? This isn't trying to hype up some. Of course, there's a lot of people who would walk through the money door. A
2x at least, salary increase. How much of us are just taking that, even if there's unknown, even if there's uncomfort in it? Especially a guy with Luke who wants to be an NFL prospect. I think he can be. I think he can be a guy that with a great year in the Big Ten again can get drafted. But it's not like this is the guy who's being talked about as a day 2 quarterback.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's life-changing money through that money door had he gone to it. So I'm not trying to act like no one would have done that. A lot of people would have done that, which is why it makes Luke not doing that something that we're talking about for 10 minutes to open this podcast up here, because it's in some ways different than what you see in the landscape of college athletics, of pro sports, right? I mean, that's anyone's job. You go towards the money a lot of times. So it's a really big move for Luke Altmyer. I think it solidifies everything he said since stepping foot on campus at Illinois, and it keeps Illinois in that tier of sneaky, fun, wild card, dark horse playoff team, and 9+ win team. But however you want to look at it, and there's going to be a lot of summer words spent on Illinois football and what it can be this year, and a lot of it has to do with that guy who stuck around.
Yeah, because for me, there's no doubt he's one of the top 2 returning quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Now, maybe Dante Moore, Julian Sayin at Ohio State, those guys, Dante Moore at Oregon, those guys take a huge leap because they're former 5-star guys. But Drew Aller and Luke Altmyer are clearly the top returning quarterbacks here. I mean, Nico now in UCLA, he's a transfer in, but he's clearly one of those guys. And while Illinois, I think their defense is going to be really good this year. I think their run game is going to improve. They're working to fix their offensive line depth, but without the quarterback, we know, there's just a cap on it, and you don't have as much of a ceiling, and you don't have as high as a floor. So to have that guy come back is absolutely huge, and there are reasons to. The relationships obviously matter. He and Barry Lunny have had a lot of success together. Illinois kind of helped resuscitate his career. There weren't a ton of Power 4 schools, really knocking on his door when he was transferring out of Ole Miss. And Illinois wanted him. They had 2 guys that they were interested in, him and Hudson Card, and they get Luke Altmyer, and they stick with him for a while. Even after he had some struggles and got benched for John Paddock's heater, they stuck with him as their starter going into another year, believed in him, and that all culminated in last year. And you could just tell Luke was a different person. He was comfortable. He was confident in himself. And to leave that for a 3-week crash course at Tennessee, for all the money, yeah, sure. But you got to learn new offense. You got to learn new teammates. You got to learn new coaches, all of that stuff.
And you don't have spring ball to do it.
No, and I don't think that was appealing to him. I'm sure it wasn't appealing to a guy like Avery Johnson at Kansas State. That's hard. That's really difficult to do, even with all the money. And to be honest with you, Illinois, I have concerns about their offensive line depth, which they are addressing now, but they do return their starters. So I think their offensive line should at least be solid. And then the wide receivers, well, a big question mark with Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin back. They went and got Hudson Clement. They went and got Justin Bullock to compete with an intriguing group of Hank Beatty, Colin Dixon, Malik Elzy, Alex Kapka-Jones. While Tennessee's got to replace its top 3 starters, receiver, and 4 of its 5 offensive linemen. So it's not like you're going into a situation that I think is on paper that much better for Luke Altmyer. So I think this made sense. When we heard it, the discussions were real with his camp, Tennessee, Illinois, all of that. But I just had doubts in the back of my head. Would Luke actually do this? Would Luke actually do it? I couldn't blame him for the money. But it's kind of nice to know, the guy that looks us in the eye and says, I don't want to start over, he was actually true to that. And I don't think we should overlook that. And I don't think Illinois fans will, because he already was a fan favorite. And to twice pass on the SEC in one offseason and all that money, how could he not be a fan favorite?
Yeah, a couple things from that. I'm glad you mentioned the talent still on offense, because I don't want to paint this as, Luke and a bunch of fringe Power 4 kids trying to play. There's still talent. There's question marks, fair question marks at receiver and how that's all going to look. That running back room, even without Josh McCray, as we're going to talk about here momentarily, Jeremy, still has some talent there. You still know there's talent at receiver. You still know Cole Rusk has the potential to be that pass-catching tight end. We know what the defense is going to be. So it's not like he stuck around just to try to lift this band of misfits to the playoffs, right? I mean, there's skill there, and there's really a lot of talent there. That's all got to come together, and we'll see how that looks in the fall. But yeah, I mean, you talked about a fan favorite. You and I were texting about this, and we threw the question to our message board. His approval rating among Illinois quarterbacks is probably as high as any quarterback since Juice.
Yeah, and obviously Shieldhouse's was very high.
So I think you kind of look at Luke as this guy who's been one of the faces of this lifting of the program, a guy who, as you've mentioned and we've talked about, has twice spurned the SEC, a guy who came in and really has just been super real And people resonate to real, and he's been that since getting here. So I think his rating is up there pretty high in terms of how fans view him. And hey, listen, that wasn't the case in that Penn State game, year one, where he's throwing 4 picks, or really even to a degree later in that season before Paddock or early on last season. I think people were like, oh, the backup quarterback's always the fan favorite in town until they go in there and they're a backup quarterback. So his people really think highly of Luke Altmyer, and he's got a chance with that and with what Illinois can do this season to really etch his name. Maybe not as high up there as the record books, even though he's going to climb up there with the big season this year, but just in terms of what he's done for this program, if Illinois goes where it thinks it can go this year. And I think don't want to put words in Luke Altmyer's mouth. That would have to be fairly meaningful, I would think, for given the guy was kind of cast off at Ole Miss a few years back.
All right, let's go through these a little quickly. Josh McCray to Georgia. Thought the SEC was a possibility for him, but Georgia, I mean, good for Josh McCray. What was your reaction to this?
Wow. I thought, I'm with you. I thought the SEC was going to be there. Obviously, some Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, and then whoever, right? I don't know who were the suitors for Josh McCray, but diving in, Brett Bielema said he saw himself as a backup running back here, and he's probably going to be that to Nate Frazier at Georgia. Nate Frazier comes back, 133 carries last year, 671 yards and 8 touchdowns. But even if you're number 2 to Nate Frazier, there's still a lot of carries to be had at Georgia. And if you look at the rest of their running back room, the door is open to be number 2 or number 1B or however you need to paint that picture to make that work. So, it seems like opportunity for Josh McCray will be there at Georgia, but I did not know that Georgia was going to be the one we were talking about on this pod.
Yeah, and I do think, you think Georgia, you think, oh, is he going to have a role there if he was going to be the number 3 running back at Illinois? Yeah, because Georgia's really young. They lost another running back, so ETN, who's probably going to get drafted late in the draft. So there is opportunity, and his experience, his ability to be a 3-down back, block, his vision, all of that with a Georgia-like offensive line, I think it'd be good for him. So it's ended up pretty good for him. It makes sense. This makes a lot of sense now that he ends up at Georgia, and I'm sure he kind of knew what doors were open for him. So I don't know if there's a lot of bad blood for Josh McCray, especially given the opportunity he's going to have here, Joey. Close to home, being from Alabama, playing in the SEC at this level. I'm sure he got a little bit of a pay bump here, so good for him.
Yeah, that's really the takeaway, right? Good for him. I think if you talk about a lack of bad blood, and I don't know that there is any, helping you have Caden Fagan, Aiden Loffer, and Khalil Valentine in the room still, and you've not just been left at spring with not a lot of options at running back. So it makes sense. Like, this is a transfer that just makes sense. Like Coleman Hawkins, if you want to stick with Illinois, like you were here for 4 years, you got this extra year. Coleman by way of COVID, Josh by way of an injury. I get it. Like, I understand what's in front of him and what can be there for him. Now Illinois needs its running backs to stay healthy and produce and see where it can go from there.
All right, the other significant addition we've seen to the transfer portal, because we've seen some walk-ons, we've seen some depth guys. Tyler Strain was one that did not surprise us, given he's struggled with injuries, and they've had other guys step up. I mean, Torrey Cox Jr. and Caleb Patterson, Jaheim Clark playing like they have, Xavier Scott returning. Made sense. Yeah, Tyson Rooks. It makes Tanner Heckle makes sense that he would look to move on for his last year of eligibility. The other guy who's significant, though, is Alex Bray. He enters the transfer portal, started a couple games last year, played about 200, 300 snaps last season. And we've talked about this. Like, he was a true sophomore. It just felt like he wasn't yet strong enough, but he had to be forced in that role because they didn't have a lot of depth on the defensive line in that rotation. But this makes sense for me, for the player, because I just feel like he's more of a true 4-3 defensive end. I think he was a solid player for Illinois. I think he could have gotten better. I just don't know if the scheme fit was there. So I think Alex Bray is going to find a good home, but I think this was just more about scheme fit than, is he going to play? Because I do think, Jamo loved him. Terrence Jameson really liked Alex Bray.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And, the only other option would have been, in this Illinois defense, is outside linebacker, and that's not who Alex Bray is, right? So he wants to play more over there with that tackle and be that guy off the edge. And that we saw the tape in high school look pretty good of him doing that. If you look at it, Illinois did empower him quite a bit last season with snaps, with belief, with opportunity. And I think probably didn't gain the weight that he had hoped, maybe they had hoped that he could have gained to play more inside, more closer to the ball on the defensive line. So I get it, right? I understand how that kind of came about and what it is. So then you look at what does that mean for Illinois really quickly here, Jeremy? Tomiwa Durjaye, Florida State transfer. Yes, like that.
That's a true 4-eye technique. He's 6'4", 6'5", 290 pounds, really good athlete. He's got to get coached up, I think, a little bit more and have some consistency. And JMO would certainly be one to do that. But that's the physical prototype of what you want there.
Yeah, and he's the guy who makes the most sense. But if even you want to go beyond that a little bit, I do wonder how much versatility someone like Jeremiah Warren possibly has. I think you and I see him and talk about him more in the scope of being a nose, but I do wonder if he can move down the line a little bit to play in that 4-eye spot. We'll see, especially with the way Angelo McCollum has been talked about at nose this spring and kind of the options that they have at that position. We've seen them kick the tires in the spring portal window a little bit on the defensive line. So there's options there. This isn't 2 years ago where it was not a lot. It was very, very thin in terms of what they could do. Pat Farrell is a guy we should mention. It's another guy that Illinois really empowered last season with snaps and opportunity. Could he take another step forward this year? But Tomiwa, to me, feels like the guy that we really need to be talking about and should really pencil in as that starter alongside James Thompson and Kurt Neal.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those guys. I was going to say that feels like those 3 transfers could all be starters, but I would not be surprised. And I know Illinois is looking to add more depth on the defensive line in the spring transfer portal. So Bray leaving, I don't think they're just going to leave it. I think they're going to address this, even if it is, just a depth piece to add to the mix. But certainly Tomiwa becomes really more important. And again, some of the younger guys we're talking about, Pat Farrell, Jeremiah Warren, Angelo McCollum, becomes even more important about the step that they take. Illinois did add from the transfer portal already, SEMO transfer offensive lineman Tyler McMillan. He started his career at Northwestern State, and then he goes to SEMO, started all 13 games at left tackle. They're bringing him in as a right tackle to compete for that job, which could potentially slide Melvin Priestley into right guard. But my biggest concern out of spring ball, Joey, was the second string offensive line, the offensive line depth. And while you got to say like Desmond Schuster, Eddie Turk, and TJ McMillan were all out due to injuries, those guys haven't yet proven themselves, right, as guys that you can definitely throw out there and feel like you can compete with in the Big Ten at this point. So they really need to add another guy because it felt like Brandon Hansen was your 6th guy, and do you have anybody else? Like maybe McMillan can be that at center, but certainly at tackle, they've had a shortage of ready-to-play guys. And when you lose Wigginson, you lose Hunter Chrysler and Hunter Whitenack, you just don't have a lot of experience back there. So to add some competition to Brandon Henderson at right guard, to give you another option to battle for the top 5, because Brandon Hansen was battling Brandon Henderson this entire spring. This was necessary. They needed a piece like this. And I also like that Tyler McMillan has 2 years of eligibility, so you have a potential starter for next year, because you lose 4 starters after next year. And what are Henderson? What are Hansen? If you can add McMillan to that, at least you have a really decent option as a starter that can compete there. So like the addition. He's a 3-star prospect, had several other FBS programs after him, but he had the connection to Corey Parker, defensive backs coach, played for him at River Rouge in Detroit. So,
okay, so I also want to add Aiden Knappich is a guy that they're hoping to redshirt this year when we talk about starters in 2026. So we just named a lot of names. So let's break this down a little bit here. The non-negotiables to change are Josh Grutz at center, J.C. Davis at left tackle, and I would probably put Josh Geske at left guard. I do not expect center left to change in any meaningful way. Okay, so when you talk about McMillan coming in, competing for that right tackle spot, he is not competing for a starting spot with Melvin Priestley. There is no world in which Melvin Priestley's healthy and not starting. So what we're saying is
he might be their most, I think he is their most talented offensive lineman, right? When it's just pure athleticism, power, I think he's their most talented. JC's their most consistent, but yeah, Melvin is one of the 2 best offensive linemen they probably have.
So what we're saying is we talked about this, I think, at times last season going into last year in the secondary, especially with Xavier Scott. If McMillan is good enough to be your right tackle and you feel good at that, then and you feel he's a better option than who you have at right guard, then Melvin Priestley simply moves to right guard. That's how that's going to shake out. So
because that is Priestley's position in the NFL.
Yes, that's right. So that's when you said competing for right tackle. I didn't want anyone to hear that and think, wait a minute, is Melvin not? No, he's going to be either a right tackle or a right guard, and you'll go from there. But you have more names you're talking about, and you did a good job, Jeremy, of laying those out. Brandon Hansen, it sounds like, had a really, really good spring, and a guy who we saw on the travel roster a year ago who keeps kind of pushing his way into the conversation. An early get for them in the recruiting process, but one that they held on to because there were some bigger programs coming in to try to talk with him that he had no interest in starting those conversations with. And then Brandon Henderson, a guy that we saw start a lot last season, really in the back half of the year after Zy Chrysler, for lack of better terms, went to the bench. So those are that's the puzzle to shake out on the right side of the offensive line in summer and fall camp and see where that goes here. But it's really a McMillan, Henderson, Hansen fighting for one spot on the right side of the line. It's just, what spot is that going to be?
Yeah, now we got two McMillans on the offensive line.
I know. When I said that, it's like, oh, hold on. I'm all turned around.
Yeah, Tyler McMillan. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And, some people might be like, whoa, well, what does this mean for Brandon Henderson? I think they want him to be consistent and win the job, right? And this is what you should have in a program, is not handing the spots to guys like this. So, they got Hansen, get some first team reps and really push Brandon Henderson. And I don't mind bringing in some competition because most years you're going to need more than 5 offensive linemen. Somebody else is going to have to come in and give you some series, maybe give you some games. Because if you have an injury, that would have been really concerning for me if Illinois did not add to this group, even with Brandon Hansen kind of taking a step forward. So I don't mind it. This is what you got to do. The one thing I'm concerned about is Illinois' offensive line prep recruiting. You are very transfer heavy right now. J.C. Davis, Melvin Priestley, you're fortunate J.C. Davis got another year of eligibility. Aiden Knappich comes in, potentially your left tackle next year, at least an emergency option. But Brandon Henderson's really Brandon Hansen are the only guys that really are prep guys that are battling for a starting spot. And you've lost a lot of guys to transfer portal that didn't pan out. I know they're high on Zafir Stewart moving forward. We'll see if TJ McMillan is their center after Josh Kreutz leaves. It takes time for some of these guys to develop, but the first 2 recruiting classes or so just haven't panned quite out so far. So that's something I'm looking forward to, seeing if they can land some more high pedigree offensive linemen. They're off to a good start in this class with Landon Von Segern and Casey Tillman out of Olney. But, man, landing a Kai Pritchard or a Micah Smith certainly make you feel better.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you mentioned the prep recruiting. That first class is completely out of the offensive line room. The only one still on the roster to this moment is Clayton Leonard, and I believe that second class is just TJ McMillan and Brandon Henderson. Is that right? I'm going back through. I'm trying to multitask here.
Zach
Amlin's gone. So losing that first class entirely, you're seeing where that gulf is, where you've got to attack the transfer portal to fill out. And
to be fair, it was a COVID class. It was their first class, but still, not having a hit there is painful.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is what happened. Kind of a defensive line similar scenario that we had talked about in previous years. But you've seen them win more Power 4 recruiting battles in these last really 3 classes, right? Going with Henderson, McMillan, and on forward. You got to see those guys start to take that step in the rotation and be fixtures, multi-year fixtures of your offensive line. And some of that is a development chamber. It does take time to get those guys ready to roll. You've seen what happens when you trot out a bunch of freshmen out there or second-year guys and how difficult that can be. But you're starting to get into the window. I think that you would like to see those prep commits having more of an impact on your offensive line. And obviously the way this year shakes out, I don't know that we're going to be having that conversation, but unquestionably next year in terms of how that 2 deep and really headliners on the 2 deep, when you talk about a Henderson and a Hansen and McMillan, what that looks like and what kind of contributions you get from those guys.
On the flip side, kudos to them getting J.C. Davis. Kudos to them getting J.C. Davis for a second year. And kudos to them getting Melvin Priestley, who has been an unbelievable find, and getting a lot out of Josh Kreutz and Josh Geske, who weren't like the most ballyhooed prospects when Lovie Smith got them in his final recruiting class. So there's a little credit to be had with the guys they found in the transfer portal as well. All right, let's get back to the class 2026. 4-star Victor Singleton, top 100 prospect in the class of 2026, 2 months after he commits to Illinois, decommits, and is now headed to Texas A&M, which was one of his top 5 when he originally committed to Illinois. It was a little bit of a surprise to me when they got him, Joey, and one of the first things I was told by somebody inside the program was, now we got to keep him. Now we got to fend everybody off. So kind of knew this would happen. This is what happens when you have top 100 prospects. You get 4 stars that have SEC and Big Ten offers, right? But still stings given the relationship you had there, what, kind of buzz he brought to your program. I don't get a lot of concerned with this staff and defensive backs, but this kid is different talent-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I heard the same thing that you had heard after they got him is long way to signing day, basically, right? And I think that was in January, I want to say.
January 1st was when they got him, yeah.
Royal Rumble is how I associate that in my mind.
So is Easter time WrestleMania for you? Is that what it is?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I was actually, in fact, at Taco Bell on my way to a WrestleMania party when we got some transfer news. I had to go back and get the laptop anyway. Yeah, it was a matter of keeping him, which was going to be the biggest story to get to signing day. I think the thing that when you look at the timeline, he was in Champaign like the week he ultimately decommitted and flipped to Texas A&M. Maybe, yeah, it was much tighter window, I think, than a week. I don't want to say uncertainty, but I do think it was 2 days, maybe 3. So you kind of knew that was a possibility. But yeah, I mean, we talked on this pod, I think, the last time about him being one of the most important gets in this recruiting class, given where he ranked, given his talent, all of those things. I think if you want to look at a half full glass, you would look at what Aaron Henry has done, what Corey Parker has done in the secondary, in development, and taking some of these maybe under-recruited Torrey Coxes of the world, Caleb Pattersons of the world, and made them serviceable Big Ten players and just believe that they can keep developing defensive backs, but it's a lot easier to develop a defensive back, and you probably have a higher ceiling when that defensive back is as talented as Victor Singleton. So it's not obviously we're not trying to make this sound like a loss. It's like, well, they just develop guys anyway. It's a factory for DBs. They do a good job developing, but man, you would sure like to have that guy as part of your 2026 class.
Yeah. And again, before the house settlement, gets finalized, NIL money gets thrown and Texas A&M certainly has it. And listen, this is the game. This is the game when you get prospects of Victor Singleton. So as Illinois rises in stature, Joey, and as you go after prospects of this caliber, this is it. I mean, the bill goes up for guys like this, and the stakes get higher, and there's more big fish going after him. So even if you feel like got him on your line, that doesn't mean you reeled him in, because it's a long way till signing day, just as you said. So as Illinois gets more of these battles, stuff happens. This stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, you like to see a program grow if you're a fan of Illinois football and see this step forward. But suddenly you're in a pool where you're not the best offer. You're not the best among a group of MAC offers, right? I mean, you are in the wars with big-time programs, with the Michigans of the world, the Texas A&Ms of the world. Go on down the list in terms of some of the names we've seen in those fights. Tennessee a few times with Illinois. Gabe Akis, Luke Altmyer were really being pursued heavily by Tennessee. That's life. I mean, that comes with winning, right? That's
comes part of this thing. To your program too. Like a Josh McCray, you feel great about a guy you found, first recruit for Brett Bielema. It's like, Georgia wants our guy who is our second or third running back. Like they want to pick at our roster. Like that's just it's a new thing for Illinois. I mean, it's a sign of what you are building, but that's the reality when you have a program like that.
Yeah, and I say you're no longer always the best option when you're fighting against the MAC teams. Obviously, Illinois is, but I think Illinois has also established itself as a pretty good option to have good footing going in to those Power 5 battles. They're not the worst option for these kids who have a number of Power 5, Power 4 interests. I mean, they're right there, and we've talked about this, Jeremy. I don't want to tangent too much, but it is really something else to watch and for us to cover, especially very closely, this program's rise and change in terms of perception and talent acquisition and development. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that this wasn't what we were talking about, right? When they were the best among the MAC options for high school recruits. So I think it is worth zooming out a little bit and seeing where this has come in a short order, really. I mean, all of a sudden, it's like one day Illinois just beat Notre Dame and whoever for Caden Fagan, right? Illinois just beat out Iowa for Aiden Lawford. And those were such big moments in time in Brett Bielema's recruiting tenure. And now you fast forward a year and a half, 2 years, like that's just the normal now. That you are fighting Iowa, you are fighting some of these programs that really didn't feel like it was very attainable to be for Illinois for some time. And now you're winning those battles. It's just really, really crazy to watch having happened or still happening, however you want to kind of point to that. It's something else.
It goes straight into, they got a good one last week. I really liked their get of Tony Balanganayi, Palatine, defensive lineman. Illinois recruiting him as defensive lineman, 6'4", 260, 270. And if you put on his film, like there's some rawness to him, as most juniors in high school would have. But man, the way he moves, how quick his feet are for his size, his incredible length, I think he's an ideal fit for what they want in that 4-eye technique. I was talking to somebody in the program last week about him, and I said, kind of reminds me of Tomiwa Durajaye. And they said, yep, that's kind of a really good comp. So you talked about beating other Big Ten programs. His offer list, he had an official visit scheduled to Iowa State, so that seemed like one of his big suitors. They were the first Power 4 school to offer. Illinois was the second. But recently, he'd gotten offers from Michigan, Michigan State, Miami, Missouri, Nebraska, Ole Miss, Purdue and Rutgers had offered, Kentucky, Kansas, Kansas State, Auburn. That's a really good list of schools. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 21 prospect in the state of Illinois. I think his ceiling is higher in this, and I think putting him in a Terrence Jamison run defensive line room, I am thrilled about that. So a guy that probably takes some time here to develop, but this is a kind of defensive line prospect you really want to stack. And boy, Terrence Jamison is starting to do that, Joey. He's the first defensive line commit in this class, but Demetrius John, Cameron Brooks, Isaiah White, Angel McCollum, even Jeremiah Warren, Pat Farrell, like you are starting to stack some talent in that defensive line room that looks like a Big Ten defensive line room.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, remember, like, to recap people, he was initially recruited as an offensive lineman. I think it became clear to him and maybe to schools pursuing him that defensive line was where he saw himself and wanted to try that out. And we say that he's a pretty good offensive lineman too now. Like he's awfully good at that. And they were recruiting him legit to be an offensive lineman. But it goes back, Jeremy, to what we were talking about probably on the last pod. This is an everything right type of recruitment for Tony Balanganayi. You get in early, you can quibble that they weren't the first, that's fine. That doesn't really matter. And every kid, that matters something different to them, right? But they were in very early, second Power 4 offer, really pivoted when he was ready to pivot to a different position on campus a number of times, did a really good job of closing that down. That's the value of multi-year, 16-month, whatever recruitments, where you can have the trust to say, oh, you really want to play defensive line, huh? Yeah, we're good. Okay, let's make that happen. And to long winding way to get to your point of the defensive line room was something we talked a ton about early on in this staff's tenure, and the misses of 21 and 22. If I'm not mistaken, 22 is in that conversation as well. And now you're starting to see them really, really get a lot of talent and win a lot of Power 4 recruiting battles in that room. And that is like the offensive line, but you're seeing the prep recruiting start to come to light a little bit more on that defensive side. Yes, they went and added 3 transfers who we expect to start and play heavy snaps, but that was to fill that gap, that 2-year gap of recruitment. But you're seeing guys like Jeremiah Warren, Angelo McCollum. I don't know if Demetrius John is going to be in that on-field, really role-playing conversation this year, but he will be beyond that. Pat Farrell is in that conversation. We know Isaiah White and Cameron Brooks are massive people. They are huge. So you're seeing, you're right. It looks like a defensive line, a Big Ten defensive line room now, and you're not having to throw out there out of necessity sophomore year Pat Farrell or sophomore year Alex Bray. And we're not trying to belittle what they can do on a football field. They needed to add more strength. There was some necessity to put those guys out there. So it's starting to really take hold. And we know Brett Bielema believes in the trenches, both sides of it. And you're seeing, at least defensively, you're seeing that start to hit with some of those recruiting wins coming to fruition.
And I would add Kingston Shaw and Jacob Alexander, who will be edge guys. That's the defensive front. Those are men. Like they might be 16, 17 years old, but they are built and they are athletic. And then they're going after guys like King Liggins, Cameron McCaney out of Indianapolis. So that's a good start to the defensive line class. I imagine they'll add to that in June.
Cameron McCaney is a bowling ball.
Yeah.
He's not a very tall guy, but there's a lot of him. And he is exactly what you think of a nose tackle. Exactly what you think.
And getting that guy like Isaiah White in with the nose tackle developer and Terrence Jameson, love that idea. King Liggins, they've made up a lot of ground for. Chicago Brother Rice. Again, they were late in that recruitment to offer. They recruited him. They were late to offer, but he visited 3 times in 1 month to Champaign. He's taking other official visits right now. But, when you're using Johnny Newton in the film room to compare him, like that's going to be an eye catcher for a guy like King Liggins, who I think will stay in Big Ten country. So that'll be one to watch because a lot of other Big 10, Big 12 programs are in on him as well. Any other recruiting things you want to get to, Joey, before we get to spring ball as we wrap that up?
No, I just think real quick with the portal, there's going to be more portals out. There has to be. I think it'll probably be mostly lower on the depth chart guys maybe closer to just wanting to find a place to play somewhere else, whether that's down a level or however it shakes out. I don't know that you're going to see a lot more of the McCray levels of contributions, the Alex Bray levels of contribution, but guys who, if you haven't seen them in a couple of years, like they would make sense because it's a crush to 105 right now. You got to race to get down to that scholarship number. There had been some conversation maybe about a ramp instead of college teams just effectively cutting players left and right to hit that house settlement 105 number. I don't know that that's going to happen. So there's still some work to do for Illinois to get there. And obviously they're still looking to add players. So the math lines up. You'll see some more defections here over the next week, 2 weeks.
Yeah. And, I had a conversation with somebody. Bielema was meeting with the players. Exit meetings have been Monday through Wednesday. And those, they're pretty frank with them about here. This is your role. This is who we're trying to bring in. And they're trying to bring in offensive line help, defensive line help. I think they're looking at tight ends. Obviously a punter we've talked about is one of their main needs. So those are some things they're looking at. But you've seen guys like Jake Furtney, who I was high on as a walk-on, was on the fringe of the rotation as a true freshman. He leaves because he's got Davin Stoffel, Cole Russ, Tanner Arkin, maybe Jordan Anderson in front of him. So you will see some of those guys. But from what I've heard, there haven't been any big surprises, like bad surprises so far. So we'll see what happens the next couple of days as the transfer portal window closes on Friday for football, closed for basketball last night. But as always, there's 48 hours for those names to come out. They just have to get their name into the school by, I believe it's 11 p.m. Central Time on Friday night. So we'll see what happens there. All right, spring practice.
Hold on, I was at the DMV and I got the Furtney this morning and I got the Furtney alert to my watch and I thought, oh man, Jeremy is absolutely wrecked
Kind of
somewhere right now trying to process this. And we say that he should be an FCS guy. He should go find himself a nice role somewhere and maybe he's a guy who resurfaces in a few years.
I can see him group of five. He's a good football player. He's got veterans in front of him and, go get a scholarship somewhere. He passed up some scholarships to come to Illinois, so I like him. I thought he's
been a fun lower on the roster Illini Inquirer podcast favorite here.
Yeah, Robbie Ditcher. I asked him any of the young guys standing out the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, Jake Furtney." I'm like, "Dang right, that's my guy." Poured one out for Jake Furtney leaving. All right, spring practice. We didn't get to see a lot. We got a couple practices that we got to see, but we got to talk to these coaches a lot. They're pretty upfront with us about who's standing out. And if you hear the coaches, you can kind of tell who is making an impression. So just throw out a couple before we get into our NFL draft talk, Joey, of maybe a guy that has risen his stock. I did my stock risers piece, but if you got somebody else that you want to add in here, who's a guy that people should know about more?
Well, I was just scrolling through your stock risers piece as a recap. And early on, we need to talk about Khalil Valentine right now. And I know he was limited with an injury. I think it was an ankle injury at times this spring. So I don't know that this spring necessarily changed his stock in terms of what he did on the field. But I think the opening there exists for him to be that, no doubt, clear-cut number 3 running back with Josh McCray off to Georgia. So this is a really big opportunity for Khalil Valentine. That's not the most spring ball kind of got hot like a Tanner Heckel name that I think belongs in that conversation, but from an opportunity standpoint, Khalil Valentine is a guy absolutely that we need to have that discussion about, because he's going to have, I would imagine, a fairly significant role this season within that offense.
Yeah. Obviously, with Aiden Lawfrey's injury history, he's a nice guy to have behind. Contributed as a freshman. Was it the Kansas game? Came in and helped seal that one?
Sealed his second game of the year, and it's like they're putting Khalil Valentine out there for like this. Now, that Kansas game didn't age as well as it felt in the moment, but it's like, this is such a big moment for you guys. You're putting freshman Khalil Valentine out there. And I do want to say along those lines, every year with Brett Bielema, with the exception of the 2022 season with Chase Brown, a freshman running back has come in and done something of significance, right? You can go back to Josh McCray in 2021. Chase Brown ran the ball like 700 times in 2022, so we can't really count him. But then you go Caden Fagan, Khalil Valentine. We've talked about this before, but I think John Forster is the guy who very much makes sense to be, if there were going to be a freshman this year to come in as running back, to do that. Not a spring stockriser, but just keep in mind that there's always a freshman that pops up in terms of being in that rotation or doing something at some point in their first year.
Khalil Valentine, I have no doubt. He left no doubt last year that he can get to an edge, he can turn it upfield, and he can make you miss in a very tight window. He's got skills you can't teach. Now he's got to get better at the skills you can't teach and the skills that require a little bit more strength, right? Breaking through a tackle, the vision of being like, okay, that's my hole, got to hit it. And then pass blocking. Yeah, if you want to, Chase Brown really struggled with pass blocking his first couple years. He's not great at it at the NFL, but he got better at it as his career went along. So I'm not expecting Khalil Valentine to be a stud at this, but you got to be better at those things. So that's why Thad Ward is here, and he's a very good coach. So I expect him to get better at those things. One guy I want to mention, because we've talked a lot about Braden Trimble, the hype around him. I do expect he's got a chance to crack the rotation. There's been a lot of mentions of Alex Kapka-Jones. We just got to bring him up that some practices we saw, he got some first-team reps. So I think Malik Elsey's the most likely to start at the Pat Bryant spot coming into this season because he's a big physical blocker. But has he earned the trust yet of Luke Altmyer to catch the ball? Has he earned the trust to play 500 snaps? I don't know. But Alex Kapka-Jones continues to be mentioned. He's made available to us in the media. And I think Luke Altmyer does trust that he can go up and go get a ball. So we know Hank Beatty's going to play a big role. We know Colin Dixon's going to play a big role. Hudson Clement's going to play a big role. Malik Elsey's going to play, but I feel like we owe it to our listeners, readers, everybody. Alex Kapka-Jones, he is firmly in this rotation. It wouldn't shock me, Joe, if he started a game. He started the bowl game.
Yeah, I'm with you. He was a name we heard a lot last spring and last summer too. The only problem was a guy by the name of Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin were in the way, and they could play forever. You didn't have to take those guys off the field. So that really limited Kapka-Jones. Kapka-Jones is a wonderful quote. I don't know if you spent a lot of time talking to him, but he is very Altmire-like, where he just will give you the big picture and tell you it's kind of hard sitting behind guys your first 2 years because there's a clock. All college football is mentally is a clock for when you're just done, right? And he's kind of fought that a little bit. And then he's like, wait a minute, I was behind 4 NFL guys. At the end of the day, I assume Zachary Franklin finds his way into a camp here in a few months. So, yeah, he's just a name you've seen circled around a little bit and you've heard about. But now the opportunity matches a lot of what the buzz has been with him. Justin Stepp says he's playing with a lot of confidence right now, and he's long. I don't know he's the fastest guy in the world, but he has got a heck of a catch radius. He's really, really long, and he can get downfield. So we'll see. It feels like him, Justin Bowick, Malik Elsey are kind of in that conversation, starter, right? I think this is going to be a more wide receiver room. They're going to have a lot more guys. They're going to spread it out a little bit more than what we had seen in the past. But Kapka-Jones, you're right. He's a guy that we need to bring up and put on people's radar entering training camp in still a few months.
Just to stick on offense, I would mention Carson Boyd, the freshman quarterback. One of the last practices we saw, how much does it matter? I don't know. He was the third quarterback up behind Luke Altmyer and Ethan Hampton. The arm strength is clear. He just got a lot of velo behind the ball. It really stands out in that Illinois quarterback room. So this was a big spring, I thought, for Trey Petty and Carson Boyd to kind of set the stage of what could be a battle, whether it's next year or the year after, of those guys battling for position to see who is more likely to be the long-term quarterback for Illinois. And Carson Boyd got a lot of mentions from the coaches. So I've said it over and over again, would have been a 4-star prospect, would have had way more SEC schools pushing for him if he just wasn't 5'10", 5'11". But that's his flaw, and it is a concern. But, man, he's got tools otherwise. So just wanted to mention Carson Boyd. Didn't get to see a lot of, obviously, the scrimmages where you really get to see these quarterbacks. But he got enough mentions, and we saw enough from him in the times we saw him that I just feel like long-term he set himself – he had a good start here.
Yeah, I'm with you. It aligns with everything we kind of thought with him. He and Trey Petty both ooze that quarterbackness about them. They kind of bounce around practice when we see him. So, yeah, I thought it was as far as you say, quote unquote, first impressions go for Carson Boyd, it sounds like he had a good one. Offensively, I think we've talked about Brandon Hansen at length here, but he definitely, I think, has put himself in that conversation. Davin Stoffel is a transfer they like. Can I give like a way too early stock riser for fall camp?
Yeah.
Jordan Anderson.
I mentioned him, so I'm glad you brought him up.
I think the summer for him, just a little bit more continuity there. Look, my read is Jake Furtney probably doesn't get in the portal if Jordan Anderson also is, right? Like, I think Jordan Anderson has done enough this year. I think they like the mix of strength and that downfield that he can bring. He can probably hold his own better on the offensive line than you would maybe think for a former running back. I think the summer with Tank of really just going all in on this tight end diet or, whatever, however you want to phrase it, is going to be meaningful. I don't know that I would project him to be a top 3 guy next year, but he could be a guy that it's like the second week of fall camp and all of a sudden it's like, hey, Jordan Anderson had some plays out there today. Jordan Anderson had a big catch and run, and we'll just knock that one away a little bit.
Can I give you like a cross-unit comp here? What Kenenna Odeluga is for the defense, can Jordan Anderson be that for the offense? Just kind of this sub-package Swiss Army knife that I could put at H-back. He can take a handoff. I can throw it to him. I can get him on a wheel route. It's just, especially with Josh McCray gone, there's value in having Jordan Anderson staying in the program, not only as an H-back option, but as a potential emergency running back option. Because
goal line.
Yeah, he's practiced there for 3 years. And if Fagan gets hurt again, even if it's for a game, at least you got a guy that you feel like can take 5 carries and know what he's doing back there and give you a powerful option. So I think there's a lot of value in having that kind of piece, even if it's very specific sub-package types of roles. This staff has done a really good job of finding guys and finding those roles for them.
I like that idea. And the way you described him, there's obviously a significant talent gap here. And we're going to be talking about this guy on Thursday night. But how Penn State used Tyler Warren. A little bit of just everything in terms of getting the ball in his hands. Now, Tyler Warren had more of a consistent role within the Penn State offense. So we're talking about Jordan Anderson, but they creatively got the ball in his hands and let his mix of speed and power go do things. I'm not trying to compare Jordan Anderson to Tyler Warren, but just in terms of, hey, maybe he's taking a short yardage carry here, and the next play he's running a wheel route, as you mentioned, or running down the seam. Like, I think there's possibility for that. Some of that's probably going to depend on what happens around him at tight end. How does Cole Rusk, how quickly does he get back into form? What's Davin Stoffel look like? But there's a role for Jordan Anderson on this team, and I think that's going to be a name we hear in like the middle of August.
The guy whose name I wrote down most in the practice we saw was Angelo McCollum. Mm-hmm. And I just think he's got a chance to play a significant role, especially those sub packages. I think he could probably displace General Hunt. It's kind of that, fast, quick twitch option that can really get after the quarterback. But I think he can get some snaps with Kurt Neal. We saw him take some first team snaps at some points. Terrence Jameson told me that, like, I want him fighting for that nose tackle job, that starting nose tackle job. So he's not the longest guy, but boy, he's quick. He's got good strength. Just a true sophomore, but I think he's going to play some significant snaps this year.
Yeah, again, it's why we talk about maybe wondering if Jeremiah Warren had versatility up and down the line. But McCollum's a guy who, even last year, Jameson talked about him as a game wrecker. Like, he can just get in there. He's so quick, and he's got the strength. Yeah, he's
shades of Johnny. I don't want to say he is Johnny Newton, but there's just shades of Johnny. The way they play, like, similar play style.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned him, because I think that's the position that I really like what they have in terms of depth with Kurt Neal and Jeremiah Warren and him, but I'm curious just what kind of mixing and matching you have to do to give him those reps. And I'm looking now, Jeremy, on the rest of the defense. Some benefits of returning a lot of guys, right? There's probably not a lot that
JoJo
we need to talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Hayden ended the year really well. I think they can use some creative ways. Sub packages. He played a lot. Kenenna Odeluga, Archie McDaniel said he's back to being who he was pre-injury, and I've heard that from Brett Bielema too. So he could be a starter again. So Kenenna was unbelievable at the end of the year. He had 3 sacks and like 45 reps in the last 3 games. So he's just an unbelievable pass rusher. But can he be your weak side linebacker like he was 2 years ago as your starter, kind of play that Ryan Mead role again? So those are 2 interesting players, like undersized pass rushers, Kenenna Odeluga and JoJo Hayden, but they were very good late in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kenenna Odeluga is a really interesting one to me because we saw what he can do. Again, sub package is perfect for him, especially as that linebacker room grows. His pass rush value is still very, very real. Moving back a little bit, I think we've talked and everyone's talked a lot about Tanner Heckel at this point. That's still a wait and see for me because of who's in front of him.
I think it's more of an idea, right? Like to see how he does there. They're excited about his future. But yeah, I'm still more excited about Jaheim Clark, Torrey Cox, and Caleb Patterson returning at cornerback along with Xavier Scott.
Yeah, I think I'm also more excited about the idea that you're not an injury away from chaos.
Yeah.
That you feel like you've got guys who can go in there and give you quality snaps for however long that needs to be. But we have to mention Heckel because he got a ton of buzz this fall camp. He is out at boundary corner right now. He's not at nickel. Maybe that's a road for him. But right now he is at that cornerback spot. And that's in part because, man, they got a lot of safeties who are going to be here for a little bit. And they've got some eligibility left to them. So that's, hey, Tanner Heckel's really good. And we need to find a way to get him on the field. Safety seems blocked, whereas less blocked than safety. And sounds like the move to corner has been pretty good to this point.
I'll give one more. A lot of buzz about Keelan Crimmins. They're happy about their punter addition. They just need to back up now.
I don't think Robbie Disher listens to us, but he has been waiting 57 minutes to be like, we get some freaking punter talk.
We're still long punter talk, yeah.
They do. They do love Keelan Crimmins. And I think Ethan Hampton is the holder. If we're just going to get really in the weeds on special teams, we don't need to get.
Is that one of their sells to a backup punter? You are no doubt the backup, or you are no doubt the holder. Like, we need a holder right now.
I mean, unless you saw Ethan Hampton in Madden, Jim. I know you're, Madden, like,
it's been a while. Yeah.
92 was probably the last one that you played.
What was the one with Mike Vick on the cover? That was probably
04, yeah. That's the backup quarterback is the holder in there. So, just NFL model, as we've talked about a lot with college football here. I'm mostly kidding, but to your point, Keelan Crimmins is a guy they've been very, very outwardly excited about. Mixing hang time, which is what Illinois had largely lacked. Really, even as good as Blake Hayes was, that was the knock that's keeping him out of the NFL right now is hang time. So he's mixing hang time and power. And I think that's something he's got a lot of, at some point, we should really dive in to all the tricks a punter has in their bag. Because they're like, oh, he's got all sorts of these kicks. I'm like, it feels like there's a finite number. I would be interested in truly diving into everything that he can do, but he does sound like he has a lot of various kicks he's got, and it's a hang time. Hang time's huge.
I've always wanted to do the story because I know the specialist would love it. Robbie would love it. Chris Hurd, I'm sure, would love it. Just going through the operation, of a snap to the kicker to the punter, whatever it is, all of that. I think it's fascinating, right? Because it's part of the game we don't talk about until it goes terribly wrong.
Or Tanner Arkin is running 38 yards against Michigan. Otherwise, we don't say anything. It's either like a 50-plus yard field goal, you pin them inside the 5, you kick off out of bounds, you shank a punt, or you miss a chip shot. Otherwise, no one says anything about special teams unless Hank Beatty is averaging 12 yards a return. It's such an overlooked element. But to be honest, I mean, outside of a couple, like that first season of Hugh Robertson was really, really inconsistent. He had some good moments. The Iowa game comes to mind with him. But Keelan Crimmins has a chance to maybe be the best punter that Bielema has had, just the way he mixes, at least NFL-wise, the way he mixes hang time with power. I hesitate to do that because Blake Hayes was so stinking good.
He could kick it so far. But yeah, the hang was a concern for the NFL. So that's well said. All right, before we get out of here, let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft. It's going to be a quieter one, right? I mean, we've been used to Illinois having so many draft picks here recently, but that's a good problem, which we will talk about because a lot of their top NFL prospects are returning for another year at Illinois, which is why there are so high expectations here. But Pat Bryant is the one prospect that is projected by Illinois to get drafted by almost everybody, but almost everybody has him, Joey, as like a 5th or 6th round draft pick here. He did not perform like a 6th or 5th round draft pick last year, but he didn't test all that well, right? So let's go down here. Pro Football Focus has him as the 19th wide receiver, 158th overall, 5th round. Athletic 21st wide receiver, 5th round. CBS 23rd wide receiver, 181st. That's the 6th round. ESPN 24th wide receiver, 199th overall, 6th round. But he didn't test that well, of course. 4.61 40-yard dash. The explosive testing was pretty solid, but obviously he played at a different level. So just, what do you make of Pat Bryant's NFL stock right now?
Yeah, I think there were times we thought he could be a day 2 guy early on in this, and I still think that would have been on the table if that 40 was better. That 40, and not even like massively better, but just incrementally a little bit faster would have really done a lot of lifting for him. But you know what, though? You don't draft Pat Bryant because you think he's going to be a burner. Like, that's not – if you think that's what you're getting, you've made a mistake along the way. But the NFL is a different level, right? They're so fast.
Traits matter.
Traits absolutely matter. There's a lot less margin for error without those traits. But you turn on the tape is there. He's going to pass all of the interview tests very, very easily in terms of how people perceive him and how they lead those conversations with him. So I think by the end of the day, like, take everything else out of it. Really good tape. The traits aren't maybe what you would hope. 5th round feels right. 6th round might be a little lower than I would personally do because I think the tape is so stinking good. You know how he is as a blocker. You know he's got a catch radius. He really improved his consistency last year. But yeah, I mean, day 3 pick for Pat Bryant feels about where lower than we thought initially. But once you saw those numbers, you knew that was going to be in that window.
I thought he'd rise through the process as long as he ran decently. He did not run great. It's just like Isaiah Williams, right? Both those guys just didn't run the time that they wanted, both 4.61, both one of the lowest at the combine. But I do think the film will help him. I do think the interviews certainly will help him. But yeah, like, you look at some of the comps, the physical comparisons. I went to mockdraftable.com. It's fun. They have like comps of like physically, like, there's some good ones here. Puka Nacua, Keon Coleman. It's just Keon Coleman was a different level size athlete, but they kind of play similarly. But then there's some guys that you're a little bit concerned about. Javon Baker was a 4th round pick last season, only had 1 reception on a team, the Patriots, that needed it. Courtney Davis wasn't drafted in 2020. So it's interesting because, like, he's got to overperform some of those athletic things, but he's gotten better every single year. And just like Isaiah Williams, who found his way onto a roster and stuck and now is on the Bengals, right? Like, I just wouldn't bet against Pat Bryant. Like, day 3 pick for him, I think you're getting value because I have no doubt that guy, even though he didn't play a lot of special teams, he's going to buy into special teams. He's going to come in as like the 5th wide receiver, 6th wide receiver on a team. And I think he's going to outperform, some of those other guys. And I think he's going to continue to get better. I don't have to worry about him. And that tough, smart, dependable. Like, it applies to Pat Bryant. Plus, he did it against some high-level competition. Now, people point to Michigan didn't have a great game. Oregon didn't have a great game, left in the 4th quarter with concussion. Didn't play the best against Penn State, right? So that's legit. Like that is legit. But, man, I feel like he should be 4th, 5th round grade. I think he could go in the 4th round. Brett Bielema told all the scouts, take him 1 round higher than you have him because you will get the most out of him. So it'll be interesting. But certainly belongs in the NFL, certainly belongs drafted.
Yeah, and when it comes to a time that inevitably everybody, for the most part, gets cut, he is going to be a very hard guy to have to cut because he's going to buy into everything that a team wants out of him. And I'm with you. I think special teams – remember there was a time early on in his career that he was back there on kickoff, and then he just became too valuable for them offensively to keep him back there. But that's still also an avenue for Pat Bryant in the NFL. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to get drafted. It's good for him. He had a hell of a good college football career. And we'll see where he goes. I mean, I think I know you had a list out there. I know you want to get into that. And you've probably researched this.
No,
I mean, no one more than me.
I put some fits out there. It'd be fun if he stayed home at Jacksonville, but I also think where James Gladstone and Liam Cohn come from, the Rams, they've kind of taken these physical, skilled receivers that have athletic flaws, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and like those guys because they really help the run game. I think Pat Bryant really helps the run game. Right? He's a really good blocker. He's got versatility. He's played some slot at Illinois. So I don't think we should overlook the wide receiver development that's happened under Barry Lunny, both with George McDonald as wide receivers coach now, Justin Stepp, who's got a long history of wide receiver development. So it's good that Illinois continues to produce these kind of guys. But, the Ravens, your Packers, always find guys like this in the 4th or 5th round. That would make some sense. I'd love to see them at the Bears in the 5th round if their picks there because they could use a bigger physical wide receiver with all the smaller guys they have. Because Roma Dunze is kind of only one big guy. But, yeah, I think whoever drafts him won't regret it.
Yeah, and I think Washington was a team that was invested in him early in the process, and then they got Debo, right? And I think that probably changed that calculus there. I do want to, while we're talking, you mentioned Pat in the slot, and I think of like a Colin Dixon. Before we get into next year's draft, I want to ask, because I know you're very big on the power slot and that concept of what that is.
My new head coaches.
Is it getting closer to that shift? Like you think of a Colin Dixon, or if you think of the scope of Illinois, right? Like Hank Beatty is not really a power slot. Colin Dixon is. We saw Pat Bryant there at time. Could that be an avenue where, we maybe have to reframe how we think of slot receivers in Champaign from the Isaiah Williams to the more Colin Dixon molds?
Well, you always got to react, right? And defenses have reacted to offenses that have spread it out with the nickel. But when now offenses have to react, right? So we're kind of seeing this resurgence of running the football in the NFL. So to have a bigger slot like Colin Dixon can really help you reinvigorate the running game. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a bigger kind of power slot. He's only 5'11", but he's big, strong, physical guy. Roma Dunze, people have talked about is a potential power slot guy that you can kind of get these mismatches against these smaller nickelbacks. So, it's fascinating to kind of see that the slot receiver isn't always this 5'9" fast guy. Now it's becoming, you got to be quick, but you can find some matchup issues or matchup advantages if you have like more of a powerful guy there.
Yeah, your Colin Dixons, Hudson Clement could fit into that in certain packages for Illinois, especially as we talk about your Malik Elzies, your Alexander Kapka-Joneses, Justin Bowick. So I'm really interested to see how Illinois, if Illinois goes that road into more of a power slot, or at least have some options sitting there beyond what we see on the roster right now, just as you look at future roster building with them, because I think it does unlock a lot more. And something we talked with Pat Bryant, I was more high probably on Zachary Franklin playing some more slot last year, but Pat Bryant certainly did, and he did well, and that could be a road for him in the NFL and some lineups too.
Doesn't really sound like anybody else will get drafted. Seth Coleman is kind of mentioned as a fringe guy. That injury timing did not help him.
No.
Was able to go through the process.
I think T-Raw Edwards is a good football player. Like his tape is good. He's going to ace everything else. He's not that tall. He's going to get into a camp, but to me, it feels like him and Seth Coleman would be
Dennis Briggs.
Two guys. Dennis Briggs. I mean, what a big year for that guy.
Yeah.
What a really, really, beyond being healthy, just playing at the level that he always knew and Terrence Jamison knew he could play at. So, yeah, those Zachary.
Yeah, Zachary, I would have thought coming into the process didn't run that well, which we knew he wouldn't. So, like, that's not who he is. All those guys will get into camps, though, right? Like, I just, but 6th, 7th round, who knows? It's really just, who don't you want to be able to get to a priority free agent deal? Like Isaiah Williams, at the end of the day, people were happy he didn't get drafted in the 6th or 7th round because they felt like we could pick our spot, make just as much money. So sometimes you'd rather not get drafted in the 7th round than get to pick your spot as a free agent.
Yeah, once that middle of the 7th comes, you maybe like lose cell service as best you can. Yeah. All right, Aaron Rodgers. Go to Aaron Rodgers' house in California. There's apparently no cell service out there, so you can just avoid being drafted if it gets to that point.
He's going to make the night about him, isn't he? He's going to leak out like an hour before the draft. I'm going here, so it's all about him.
The same thing 4 years ago when he wanted out of.
Yeah, certain place. Ended up going very well for you. By the way.
Hey, I am thrilled. I'm thrilled to be in Green Bay. for the draft. You are gonna if they cut to somebody in a Jordan Love jersey just eating cheese by the wheel, maybe a Moon Man in hand, you'll know who it is. I'm very excited. I'm excited to see how Green Bay pulls it off, because there's been so much talk about it being such a small city to make this all work, and people are going to be parking in yards. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. My best friend's flying in, so we're going to have maybe a beverage or two, a lot of cheese, some burgers. You have to probably have to take some walks, I would imagine, Jeremy.
It's weird. Like I went to day 3 of the draft. It was in Chicago, I think, the first year, because my brother lived in the Loop. So I went there, went to Vegas when the draft was there on a whim. Me and my brother and a couple of buddies went out there. And then I know you were in Kansas City for Devin Witherspoon. So
I did Nashville as a fan.
Yeah. It's amazing what this has become, isn't it? Like, I read Will Leach's piece about how it's like we go to this event, hundreds of thousands of people go to this event. It's really just a spreadsheet on live TV, just reading off names. It's totally true. It's totally fair. Yeah, I love it anyway. I have always loved the NFL draft because it's hope, Joey. It's hope for your team. And even for a team like you, it's like hope that, hey, maybe we can finally hit a first-round pick out of the park and become an elite team again. And for me, it's just like, I need hope any way I can get it with my franchise. So for any franchise, it makes sense. You're just like, maybe this can be the guy to turn the franchise.
Feel better about that? Feel better about throwing that little dig in there?
What?
Even for a team like you, maybe you can be elite again. Come on now.
No,
I get what you're saying. I'm giving you a hard time.
You're happy with your program there. It's just, I get you haven't hit on a first-round pick in a little bit, right?
It's been a little bit. Yeah. You say this. I was thinking about the draft today as we start to pack. And
unbelievable day 2, day 3, by the way.
Yeah, no doubt. So, like, my best friend and I we're going to be all in, right? So, like, all right. Like,
are you wearing something stupid?
It's my face.
Well, just a jersey.
These allergies. But I'm like, all right, we're going to be locked in till 23. Maybe we'll hit a bar or something after. And then I thought, my girlfriend and his wife, after like the 6th pick, are going to be like, why are we out here? It's cold. It's rainy. You can get this all on your phone. You don't need to be here for this moment. And I would really have a hard time to have to, like, with a straight face, be like, no, you're wrong. Because they're totally right. Like, I don't know that we're actually going to be on Friday on draft grounds, or if it's going to be drink somewhere at a bar a few blocks away and having a good time. But it's such a cool experience to be there and be a part of. Probably going to be a lot of people. But it's nice to take a break from the work part of the draft. And I guess we have to say shout out to all the returners for Illinois football for making this a one-man show for Illini Inquirer this weekend.
Yeah, well, just a trip to Florida here. All right, let's do this quickly. We're going a long podcast, but I'm enjoying it. Next year's draft should be really good for Illinois. We went down a list, I think it was a couple weeks ago, of all the guys that could be drafted. So let's do a quick draft ourselves of who will be drafted highest among the 2026 draft-eligible Illini football players. I will allow you to go first here, Joey.
I will take Xavier Scott. I think he is in line for a really big year. His versatility in the secondary is meaningful for teams. And hey, look, Illinois got a reputation about DBs, and I think that's going to ultimately matter, and it's going to pair well with what I think is going to be a good year for him and what has been a good career for him to this point. But versatility is key for him, same way we talked about Quan Martin. Is that a second-round pick? I don't know. I don't know what round that is, but I think he'll be the first one off the board.
Yeah, it's a hard discussion between him and Gabe Akis, right? But both those guys, I think, probably could have been drafted higher than Pat Bryant this year. So I will certainly go with Gabe Akis here. He can get better too, right? I mean, he's just a junior now. He's a true junior, so becoming a senior right now, he's got a good – I thought he really added to his moves this year. It wasn't just a bull rush. You saw his handwork get better. He's really instinctive, and he finally, finished more plays last year. I mean, 8 sacks is really difficult to do in a college football season. So he had a really great year. Can he take another step forward? My question for him is, like, what is the athletic testing? I don't know if it's elite, top tier. Johnny is just a different level of quick twitch athlete than Gabe was, but Gabe's ability to play 4-3 defensive end, I think, is probably more what he can do. But if somebody wants to slide him inside, like, I don't think he's a 3-4 outside linebacker at the next level. They usually want quicker guys. but does somebody see him as somebody who can play 3-4 defensive end, maybe a 3 technique if they bulk him up a little bit? Like that versatility, I think, is going to go do well for him. So who would you take out of Gabe?
He's also a guy who his testing, I don't know, because of that, because if you think you can bulk him up and slide him inside, how much that's going to really weigh for him, just with what he could possibly be on the line. I'm going to go with Melvin Priestley next. I think Melvin Priestley is in for a really big year. We've talked about what's that going to look like. Is that going to be a guard? Is that going to be a tackle? I don't know. He's an NFL guard. He's incredibly violent. He's quick. He's strong. He's coached by good coaches, and that is significant. Brett Bielema, Bart Miller, I think NFL teams know what they're going to get with offensive linemen coming out of those programs, and you pair that with his mentality, with his physicality. I think there's a lot to like about him and what he can do at the next level.
Yeah, I think it's a good pick because I think the ceiling is a little bit higher, the floor maybe a little bit lower than JC Davis. JC Davis would be my 4th selection here, though, right? Like, I just think day 3 pick. Is he a tackle at the next level? I think that's got to be answered, but his pass protection is really, really good. Probably some strength questions. Technique he can improve a little bit, but he was really good towards the end of the year. So I'm really excited to see, what his consistency is. If he becomes even a little bit more dominant of a pass blocker, but he really started to get going as a run blocker too late in the season because they were trying to unleash a little bit more physicality out of him, and Bart Miller got it by the end of the year. So I think returning for him can do him well, just to guarantee he gets drafted. Like this year, I think he would have been late day 3, gets on an NFL team, but this year he might be able to solidify that a little bit more. So 2 offensive linemen, 1 guy in the defensive trenches. That's a pretty good start. Who'd you take fit?
This is where it gets interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This might be ahead of myself because we haven't seen him play in an Illinois uniform to this point. But James Thompson looks like physically right now looks like an NFL player walking around the Smith Center. He's enormous. He is huge. Excuse me. His physical skills in this system with that guy, Terrence Jamison, coaching him. Sign me up. Sign me up as the 5th Illinois player. And you know what, Jeremy? He could probably rise. We might have him placed differently in late November in terms of how we look at this.
Yeah. I would have gone with him next. There's a lot of buzz about James Thompson Jr., how good he can be. He entered last year kind of as on the day 3 kind of thought process as a prospect. So now he had a good career at Wisconsin, but got injured last year. Illinois is very high on what he could be. Is this Luke Altmyer next?
That's where I was held up. That's where I was held up.
I think it's Altmyer. You think of some of the physical comps, like a Skylar Thompson was drafted in like the 6th or 7th round. I think he should enter the season as a day 3 level prospect at the very worst. But if he has a great season, man, like especially without a stud wide receiver like Pat Bryant, not the proven guys, like if he leads Illinois to another good season and increases his accuracy even a little bit more, like why wouldn't he be? Like if he's one of the better Big Ten quarterbacks, he should be talked about like an NFL draft prospect. Like even if you want to make like a Dylan Gabriel comp, which I think Luke's arms will even like similar to that. Like if he can be that kind of point guard, I think he can play himself further onto NFL radars. I think we'll have a chance at the NFL. And I would put Luke Altmyer next.
I like him in like a timing offense where like you think of like what Miami does with Tua, just someone who he can distribute it. He's got a strong arm, especially like to put some velo on some of those shorter routes. I like that idea. Now we're reaching, right? Beyond Luke, we're really in reach territory. There's not a super obvious one that I'm missing because I think there's a guy that they're going to need to really have to move mountains to get back. Like I think they could have a Xavier Scott, another DB in that Xavier Scott. We really need you to come back for your redshirt senior year in Matt Bailey.
Yep,
that's happening, man. I am all in on the Matt Bailey experience for here until however long he's done playing at Illinois. Whether this is his last year, they get him back in 2026. That you saw that light bulb come on last season in the middle of the year, late into the year, and it looks pretty good when it's on. And all those Sidney Brown comps that may have been a little early in his career, you're starting to see why in terms of the speed in which he was playing at, how physical he is, staying healthy. I might be a year early on that. Brett Bielema probably hopes I am a year early on that, but I can't shake the idea of him. I think he's going to be this has got a chance to be a pretty good year for him.
Yeah, the other guys I would kind of throw out there before I make my last pick here, Josh Geske, Josh Kreutz. You wonder if they would have a chance. Kreutz obviously has to battle what Doug Kramer battled, which is the size. I think Kreutz is a little tad smaller than Doug Kramer, but Kramer was drafted, so I don't want to overlook him. Like Leon Lowry intrigues me, but I'm going to go with Tanner Arkin. The way they talk about him, Brett Bielema said he would have had an NFL Combine invite, which I was like, what? But he can block, man. He's going to play special teams. And if he can take even a slight step forward, they talk about him like they talk about Tip Ryman. I don't think he'll test like Tip Ryman because Tip's Combine was one of the most surprising things I've seen. But just a guy that, this staff talks about highly, and kind of like the way they did Casey Washington might be another similar one. Like, it's like, hey, this guy could be an NFL player. They're thinking it before maybe anybody else thinks it. So
I love the idea of him as a fullback in some packages, just barreling down through the line of scrimmage. But yeah, he's a guy, he's probably a little too big for that. But he's the guy they've talked about like that. And the pass catching numbers aren't there. So if you're hearing this, you're probably like, are you kidding me right now? But he is such a good blocker, and he is so freaking critical to everything that they do in the run game. And really, even at times, to keep Luke Altmire on his feet and giving him time. When we say they're high on Tanner Arkin, we don't that's legit. They are very, very, very high on him.
All right, that'll do it. I think we covered everything with Illinois football to this point. By the way, last couple of minutes, Carlos Gillespie has entered the transfer portal, a wide receiver that George McDonald had recruited. Not a surprise, was buried on the depth chart, and they had many wide receivers in this room. So these are the kind of defections that we thought were likely. So no big surprises yet, but if there are, we of course will cover it on this podcast and at Illini Inquirer. Good stuff, Joey. Enjoy Green Bay, man.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for the weekend.
I hope they make a terrible pick, but I hope you have a good time.
All right, thanks for the weekend.
For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.